Imagine being so angry, so full of purpose, that you leave your kids, cut your hair, and cross the sea to learn how to fight. That was Qiu Jin. Would I have done what she did? Honestly, I think I would have chickened out before I even packed the bag, but that's what makes women like her unforgettable. Let's look at 5 stories like that. Women who didn't wait, they acted. Here we go. Welcome to Voices of Courage. Here, we meet women who did more than speak. They risked everything to say what no one else dared to, not for attention, not for applause, but because silence was no longer an option. What do a monk in India, a Supreme Court judge in the United States, a swordswoman in China, a factory lawmaker in the UK, and a diplomat in the Soviet Union have in common? Well, that's easy. None of them waited for permission. They lived on different continents. They never met, but together they carved out something every woman still walks on today. So the question is, what exactly did they fight? And what did they leave behind for us to carry? I'm pretty sure we'll find out together. In this episode, the Russian revolutionary Alexandra Kollontai, the US Supreme Court dissenter Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the British lawmaker Barbara Castle, the Indian monk educator Gauri Ma, and the Chinese poet-turned-fighter Qiu Jin. 5 women, 5 countries, and 1 shared refusal to stay silent. Power shifts fast in revolutions. One day you're writing policy in Moscow, the next you're in Norway, because you are considered a threat. Let's take a look at what happens when the revolution you helped build turns against you.
She joined the Russian Revolution, and then turned against it. Alexandra Kollontai was the only woman in Lenin's government. She forced socialism to confront women's needs, public nurseries, abortion rights, equal pay. That made her a threat. They sent her to Norway as ambassador, the first woman in the world to hold that rank. She didn't just fight the old patriarchy, she exposed the new one too.
Her male comrades promised equality. Kollontai wrote policy that actually delivered it. Childcare, reproductive autonomy, paid maternity leave. Ideas that wouldn't reach most of Europe for another 50 years. The backlash came fast. She was labelled hysterical, divisive, too radical, and exiled through diplomacy. But being sent to Norway didn't silence her. It made her the world's first female ambassador, and a global example of how policy only changes lives when women help write it. Today, just 20% of ambassadors worldwide are women, and few push policy like she did. In Russia today, most of the rights she helped shape are gone. Kollontai reminds us, it's not enough to change the system. You have to challenge it from within. The question remains, how do you change a system that's already decided you don't belong? Ruth's story will tell us 1 or 2 things about exactly that.
You do everything right, work harder, aim higher, and still get passed over. Sounds familiar? In 1959, Ruth Bader Ginsburg graduated top of her class, but law firms wouldn't hire her, not with woman and mother on her resume. But Ruth didn't give up. She became one of America's most powerful legal minds, co-founding the ACLU's Women's Rights Project, arguing and winning landmark equality cases. They told her she didn't belong. She stayed anyway and changed everything.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg didn't just argue landmark cases. She built a legal blueprint for dismantling gender discrimination, piece by piece. She used the Equal Protection Clause, written by men for men, to protect the rights of everyone else. And even when her court turned against her values, she didn't step down. She dissented, carefully, relentlessly, and on the record. She turned being overruled into a rallying cry. Her legacy isn't just what she changed. It's how precisely she made the case that equality is the law. But today, despite decades of legal progress, women still make up only 37% of active US federal judges. We've been talking about the gender pay gap for years, but it started making headlines in the 1970s. Watch what happens when a woman stops waiting around for fairness to appear out of thin air.
When the women walked out of the factory, she walked into Parliament. and forced the country to listen. In 1968, women sewing car seats earned less than their male co-workers on the same line. So they walked out. Barbara Castle backed them and turned that strike into Britain's first Equal Pay Act. You know, change doesn't just protest, it speaks, argues, and votes. And that's what she did.
The 1970 Equal Pay Act she championed laid the groundwork for anti-discrimination law in Britain. But she didn't stop there. Castle fought for pensions, workers' protections, and unemployment rights, decades before gender mainstreaming was even a term. In the UK today, the wage gap still exists. But Castle's work was a turning point. She changed the landscape for working women in the UK and set a global precedent. Today, the UK still has a gender pay gap of over 14%. Faith is meant to be still, a private flame. But what if it burns loud enough to challenge the world? Let's see what happens when belief becomes defiance.
She gave up family life to educate girls, a path only men were allowed to walk. Gauri Ma opened a school for girls, when most weren't even taught to read. She lived like a monk and changed that girls were deliberately kept ignorant. Gauri Ma fused faith and learning and made enlightenment equal.
Gauri Ma understood that in colonial India, education for girls was a revolutionary act. Her ashram didn't just offer shelter, it offered Sanskrit, scripture, and independence. Today, India has over 2 million out-of-school girls, many in rural areas. Education remains one of the clearest divides between freedom and fate. She wrote like a fire starter, trained like a soldier, and she had no patience for waiting. Too bold? They thought so. Here's why she scared the hell out of them.
She left her husband, picked up a sword, and chose revolution over obedience. In exile, Qiu Jin trained to fight and wrote verses condemning foot-binding torture and marriage. In 1906, she returned to lead a hidden resistance, with words, training, and fire. They executed her at 31, but her words still strike like blades until this day.
Qiu Jin inspired a generation of Chinese feminists and reformers who would reshape the country just years later. Today, she's remembered as a feminist martyr in China, but rarely taught in school, still too dangerous for textbooks. Today, only 3 of China's 25 Politburo members are women. The glass ceiling she cracked still hangs, heavy. But Qiu Jin didn't die to be remembered. She died so others would keep going. She wanted more than reform. She wanted rupture. They lived in different centuries, they spoke different languages, but they all stood up to the same thing, being told to wait, to stay quiet, to step aside, and they all said no. They weren't symbols, they were movement. They didn't just ask for space, they took it, and left the door open behind them. If this was your first time hearing one of their names, there are more waiting. More women who changed everything, and still don't show up in most history books. This is Voices of Courage, feminist mini-bios that bring their stories back, one voice at a time.